All right, so it looks like Lynn, we'll start with you.
Okay, so at this meeting, I wanted to just talk about COVID response a little bit and some of the work that we're doing to prepare to reopen for fall. So I'm sure many of you have been reading and interacting with some of the requirements we have to reopen for fall. All of our leaders have been interacting with this for many weeks, and the health and safety requirements are pretty significant. And the more we get into the work, I know we talked about LPNs a lot last fall, and at that point pre-COVID, I felt like we were adequately staffed in each of our buildings. And now that we are getting into the daily health screenings and having to figure out how to have isolation spaces if we have people who become symptomatic in the building, it becomes more evident to me that at least until we get through this pandemic, I think it makes sense that we have full-time nursing coverage within our buildings. And I think that we could structure this with an LPN. So I want to back up just for a minute. You made the decision during budget season last year, you looked at the needs of the buildings who had less than full-time nursing, and you made the decision to add a half-time LPN in Berkshire because of the size and the level of need in the building. So what that meant is you still had Montgomery with a half-time RN, and you had Bakersfield with a half-time RN. So what I am proposing to you is, rather than hiring one half-time LPN, that you actually hire one full-time LPN that would be split between Montgomery and Berkshire, so that Rachel has one LPN that she's working with, so there can be consistency with the one RN, one LPN relationship, and an additional half-time LPN for Bakersfield that would work with Andrea. So what are your thoughts or questions about the idea of having an LPN in those spaces?
Lynn, can you clarify for me the current nursing situation in Bakersfield? She is already a full-time?
No, so in Sheldon, you have a full-time RN. In Montgomery and Bakersfield, you have a half-time. In Montgomery, Berkshire, and Bakersfield, you currently have a half-time RN. You already agreed to a half-time LPN in Berkshire, which leaves just two of your schools, Bakersfield and Montgomery, with less than half-time nursing. So if you do nothing, right now you have a half-time RN in Montgomery and a half-time RN in Bakersfield.
Right. No, I completely agree. I mean, I think it's pretty unprecedented, the kind of strategies that are going to be required of schools to manage having people back in the buildings, and the health, like you said, daily temperature screenings, constant kind of vigilance around symptoms in kids. Seems to make sense to me. I mean, would love to hear from Morgan how we support that uptick in staffing and budget.
Yeah, and Morgan doesn't have any great ideas on that. It's likely we could make a case that that would be something covered by COVID relief money, but that is not bankable yet. We would probably structure these contracts so that that if you needed to get out of them, you wouldn't own them the way you would own someone on a teaching contract, especially as we are preparing to potentially go back to remote learning at any given point. So you don't want to have to own anybody you don't need in that case. A half-time person in two buildings in the context of a $16 million budget doesn't worry me too much. High-cost kids or surprise tuition kids, that's where I'm always looking for storm clouds on the horizon. We won't know any of that until September, October. And that's, again, that may be, if you do go this route, that may be a point where we want to revisit this depending on what we're seeing in terms of tuition kids.
I think the other piece that I just want to point out is that one of the requirements is that we have a COVID-19 health lead in each of our buildings. So I think that what we've been hearing from the Department of Ed is it makes the most sense that these are nurses that are in those roles as health lead, and that, it is a little unnerving to have half of that time in two of our buildings not have our person who's most versed in that health and safety guidance not there.
And Lynn, do you feel as though an LPN and that level, that set of skills and that level of of expertise, do you feel like that is adequate to give Rachel the support she needs in Montgomery? And then I'm forgetting the name of the nurse in Bakersfield to give the backup and support they need with all.
I actually do, Mary, because I think that one thing I just want to say, and this might be a good opportunity to say it, is, the lift to prepare for fall reopening is kind of like indescribably large. And what I have been able to task our nursing team with during this time in terms of them serving to help guide our reopening plan around all of the health and safety measures, it's just been enormous. And I think that we have some really strong nurses on staff, and we certainly could, if there were questions, because these people won't have, been in all the town halls or on all the state level committees that our other nurses have been, but we have a really strong team wrapped around, and with the skill set they have just around their nursing training, I'm confident that, they would have the skills they need to be successful with what we need them to attend to.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear. And I'm sure it seems monumental and very multifaceted, all these kind of arenas that need to be tended in order to have school actually start in the fall. And Morgan, we had already budgeted for the uptick to have Berkshire go to full-time already, right?
Correct.
That was already in the budget.
Yep, that was.
So it's the two half-time positions that we hadn't budgeted, but where's that buffer in the budget? We have that money, or we just kind of we would go for it and hope we figure out the financial component.
I think that's what we're asking you to do, Mary, because you all know how you build these budgets. You don't embed cushions for yourself in those budgets. And, we try to get as close as we can to what our anticipated reality is. This year is full of uncertainties because we don't know, what are our overall expenditures going to look like, because we definitely are going to have some differences in what we typically spend money on versus what we're having to spend money on this year. We don't 100% know all of the COVID relief money that we'll have access to and what will qualify for that. So I think the hope is let's do this. If we need to tighten the belts later in the year, if there's not COVID money that we can apply this to, we'll tighten our belts later in the year and figure it out with the budget.
Yeah, I think I could point to any number of places that we would potentially come up with the money. And, thinking off the top of my head, we've budgeted for field trips. It doesn't feel like those are going to happen. If we go into any level of remote learning, the kids where we've budgeted one-on-one support, likely there's going to be some savings there since we won't be providing that. So I think that you could certainly start the year out with these positions with some comfort, and as long as we don't get hammered on tuition kids, probably continue that through the year.
Okay, that sounds good. I mean, it's prudent and it makes sense given the context. And Morgan and Lynn, we would be able to structure hiring these positions so that they could be legally kind of released from the position were we to then at some point have to transition as we did in March schools close and we transition to an online model again.
So last year,
Because if we wouldn't need those positions.
So this past year, Mary, when we went to closure, the order from the governor was to pay everybody, whether they were working or not. That order expired on June 30th. So that would not be how the system would be set up. So if there isn't work, there isn't going to be pay connected to it for support staff. Your teachers will continue to work all the way through. Everybody who is on your professional contracts would be working all the way through, but your hourly employees, the order is different, and they will be paid for the work that they actually do, not the hours they typically work.
Okay, understood. Thanks, Lynn. So any other discussion from other board folks who want to weigh in about this? The hiring of the 2 half-time positions.
I feel like I should, in an effort to be super transparent, say the second part of my ask before you vote. Okay?
Okay.
So I think that Mary, you kind of said you can imagine that the guidance is multifaceted and complex, and it is, to say the least. I think that one of the areas that is really dense is the guidance around facilities management and the health and safety measures that have to happen within each of our buildings. So Morgan and I have been doing some training with Nmvuusd and doing some training with our facilities staff in order to prepare for this. We have people in more of a facilities director role on the Enosburg-Richford side, but nobody on the Nmvuusd side. You all have that position budgeted, and I came to you earlier this spring and said to you, listen, I don't think we should be filling the facilities manager position right now because we don't know what's going to happen with the anticipated deficit in the education fund. We thought at that time that there was a potential that could have been applied straight to the tax rate in the upcoming year, which could have been, a profound impact on our taxpayers and what they're being asked to pay. What we know now is the strategy around filling that deficit in the education fund is more of a longer term strategy. And so it's not anticipated to be something that's going to go straight to taxpayers in this upcoming year. So although the problem is still there, we still have to contend with it. It's not as urgent in that we're going to be filling it all in 1 year. So I feel a little differently about how the recommendation I made to you about facilities management, because I think next to health and safety and the work that the nurses are doing, the work that the facilities staff are doing is complex, and there's a lot of work around managing, for example, water systems and HVAC systems and, preparing workspaces and classrooms, and just a lot of guidance connected to that. So I think that, in talking with Morgan, we both kind of feel that it would be kind of great to have someone on the Nmvuusd side that could help guide that work for those 4 school head custodians. Because that's something we're definitely having to lift a lot on ourselves right now. So I really have 2 asks today. I have the ask of filling the position that we had paused and not filled earlier. And I have the ask of adding the equivalent of a full-time LPN that you don't have budgeted for.
We have more. We have in budget. We originally budgeted for that facilities manager.
So
Morgan?
you're breaking up, but I think the question was on the facilities manager specifically, and we do have that in the budget for 2021.
Yeah, okay.
That was something we put the brakes on because we were worried about worried about the revenue deficit and how the legislature was going to plan to fill that.
Data. Well, I'm of the mind that, Lynn, I think they are important and important asks, and I understand entirely why you feel like we should revisit the facilities manager and PN support for our nurses. We'll make that motion if there's no further discussion. Anyone else wants to weigh in?
I just wanted to add something that it looks like the last few hours in the media, I don't know if this is going to have any bearing on our decision, but media is reporting that the CDC may change their guidelines in the next week, which I know this is all fluid, but something else to keep in mind. We don't know how they're going to change, but it appears they're going to lessen some of the stricter requirements. So I just wanted to throw that out there. It just hit the news the last few hours, according to the vice president stated a few hours ago that was the case.
So I think that you know, even if that's possible, John, that they lessen the restrictions from the CDC, at this time it doesn't necessarily mean that the guidance at the education department or the Vermont Department of Health would shift how we would be reopening for the fall. So an example of that would be how, you know, the governor has released increases to like maximum group sizes and, you know, things around playgrounds. Those don't always completely align with what our guidance is around education. So what we're finding is, you know, because we're dealing with large groups of kids who are consistently together potentially, and, you know, there's a potential for exposures, obviously, that our guidance tends to be stricter than some of the other guidance. So it's possible, but I'm not certain that would happen.
And just to piggyback on what Lynn's saying, I really don't see the state of Vermont going backwards in terms of guidance, especially when everyone around us is kind of becoming more of a hot spot, shall we say. So I'm feel pretty confident, especially yesterday, higher education got their guidance. I don't think anybody's going to be changing and saying, oh, I think we're going to step back now and loosen the requirements for pre-K through 12. I don't really see that happening.
And I think even if things do change, which they could because everything does change so quickly, we're in a tough spot where we have to make these decisions now anyway to be able to move forward in the fall. It's not like we could just decide at the end of August to, you know, fill those positions. So I totally appreciate what John is saying, but I agree that it's kind of like we got to make decisions now with what we have now.
I'm going to ask the question that Mary asked about the nursing staff for the facilities director. That's a person we will own. That's a position we'll own. So if schools were to close and we were to go remote and that person's position responsibilities change or are not needed as much, that's the type of situation where we own it and that person would have to be taking advantage of whatever compensation we can give them, or if they get laid off unemployment. Am I correct on that, Morgan?
So they would be on an administrator contract, and we've got a lot more flexibility in terms of how we draw that up. Generally, those are ones that we negotiate every January, February for the following year. That to me feels a little bit different than the positions that are directly in front of students, because even if we go to remote, we still have these buildings that we have to maintain. And, you know, the cleaning is obviously a lot easier, but there are other concerns that you have about, you know, to what extent do you mothball a building? What are the implications if you're not in there? running systems every day. So I would kind of treat those two positions as a little bit different when you think about who you own long-term and who you don't.
Okay, so I guess then my concern is for the existing custodians, if there wasn't so much work to be done if we were to go remote, what happens to those people who are kind of on the front lines of cleaning the bathrooms and the hallways and whatnot, and we have this extra person who's coming in to supervise them. I don't get me wrong, I totally have been for this position. I advocated for it when we first discussed it, and I understood why Lynn and you decided that you should ask us to consider not hiring this person because of the budget situation. But now I'm thinking, okay, if we're going to retain this person, if we hire them and we're going to retain this person, then what happens to any extra personnel if we go remote?
So you're being quiet, Morgan. Are you wanting me to take that one?
You can take that one.
I thought you might want me to. So it's a great question, Lisa. And I think that I don't really see the facilities director so much being the person who's supervising the cleaning at the building levels, as much as making sure that there's a strategic plan in place for how all of the functions in a building need to occur. So I think that, you know, Morgan and I served on a reoccupancy planning task force through VisBit, and I know way more about HVAC systems than I ever kind of thought I would know about HVAC systems at this point. And we need someone with that kind of background information who can go in and say, all right, we're down in closure, so we need to adjust the HVAC system to do X, right? Or we're ramping up to shift from a closure period to a reopening period. So I need all the staff in all of the buildings to be ramping up those HVAC systems to do Y, right? And I know that, you know, we're going into closure, and I need, you know, Berkshire, for example, you own a water system. You've had stagnant water in your building, so I need you to ramp up your secondary disinfection system. So somebody who's really looking at how all of the systems play together, not so much supervising the what's happening for work on the ground. So I just see them kind of falling in different job categories. So I don't feel like one would be taking away from the other necessarily.
Okay, understood. I was not seeing this person with your latest ask. I was not seeing this person as being such as an administrative position. So I definitely understand that. Thanks.
You're welcome. How'd I do, Morgan?
Great job. And I think in terms of process, I don't know that we need a motion for the facilities piece since that is in your budget. We just need some direction. But you probably want something motion-y for the LPN positions.
Yes.
And I have a quick question, Morgan. I mean, originally, before we hired the clerk that works for the Sheldon project, before we decided to weren't going to move forward with the facility, hire that fella for the position if we are now bringing a facilities manager on board, or given the fact that the facilities manager will be so kind of integrated with the kind of fall, perhaps they just clerk of the works.
So I wish you spoke like that in real life, Mary. I
What
think
is
your
it sounding? What
Yeah.
does it sound like? Do I
It
sound
goes
like a robot?
super slow and then it goes super fast. So I think you were asking about the facilities manager vis-a-vis the clerk position, and what we had originally tossed around as a concept with the Sheldon project is that if we had somebody hired on early for the facilities manager, they could clerk the project. My guess is that it's going to take us a month at least to get a facilities person on board, and that's probably optimistic, just because we have to go through the advertising, reference checking, interviewing process. So the hope from the folks on the ground in the project is that that's going to be largely done by the start of school, as opposed to the November break, which is what the original time frame was. So I kind of think that those two positions aren't necessarily going to overlap in time. But if that wasn't your question, let me know.
No, that was totally my question, and that makes perfect sense. And I'm sorry that my data and Wi-Fi both suck so badly.
It's quite entertaining. It's okay.
Okay, so any further discussion? There is a motion on the table.
And can you read that motion again for me as a note taker?
Well, the motion is to approve hiring 2 part-time LPN positions, correct, Lynn? I'm getting that right?
I think the equivalent of a full-time LPN position. It will, you already have a half-time. It's complicated because you already have a half-time. So I want to take part of what you're approving and make that one full-time and then hire another part-time.
Okay, so essentially, we are making a motion to hire 1 full-time and 1 part-time LPN that will split between the various buildings. Okay, any further discussion on that motion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. John,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
and did I get everyone? I think I got everyone, eh? Jean Marie's not here,
And Aaron's not here.
and Aaron's not here. Okay.
Thank
And
you.
Morgan, you said we do not need a motion for the facilities manager since we had already budgeted and agreed to that position
Correct.
much earlier in the year.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, great. So Lynn, you have a student
Put that there,
here?
placeholder.
Okay.
We didn't really need it.
Okay, super. All right, Morgan, you are up.
Okay, so I sent you out a brief financial update just to give you a heads up on where we are with the small schools grant. And I can take any questions on that, although there's not been any movement yet. One additional thing that I wanted to update you guys on, because we just got the news today, and this is more an SU issue, but there is going to be some COVID reimbursement coming in for the summer meals delivery that we're doing. There have been no details yet that I've seen. I suspect what they will do is require us to show what we've spent, what we've gotten through the regular reimbursement, and then they will cover any shortfall if there is one there. So that was a little bit of a leap of faith, continuing that program through the summer, and it looks like that schools will be kept whole with the use of the COVID money. Any questions on that? Okay. I also sent you out 2 change orders that we'll be looking for you to approve that exceeded Jean Marie's signing authority. It was 17 and 19, and these are the 2 sort of remaining large issues in the project. 17 is dealing with the gym floor. There were some concerns from the flooring manufacturer around the asbestos abatement that was done there. We've been going back and forth with them, and we've got a system now that they will warranty, and it seems to have met everyone's concerns. That change order is a total of $6,811, and there are a few other floor related change orders, a couple of credits and some that are much smaller that I will take care of away from the table. But this should be the last that we need to talk about the gym floor on. The other one, PCO 19, is around doing some repairs to 2 sections of the roof. And the backstory is that when we were pulling off the siding, it became clear that there was both historic and recent water damage in 2 spots. They were sort of where 2 very flat roofs meet each other, and the theory is that there was ice damming and backing up. They had clearly tried a solution with a TPO, which is sort of a rubberized roof, several years back, and that was the section that was that still had some active leaking and active rot going on. So Spates and your clerk got proposals from 2 outfits. Evergreen out of either Berkshire, I'm not sure, Evergreen's maybe out of Winooski, gave a proposal for either standing seam solution or another TPO solution. And then Mountain View, which is out of Berkshire and Richford, and has done some work for us on the Richford roofs, came up with a proposal for standing seam. They did not want to bid a TPO roof because when they looked at it, they said that it wasn't going to work, and they should have known that it wasn't going to work the last time they tried it. So we've got 3 quotes on that, and I'm going to recommend that you take the second option 1, which is the cheaper of the 2 standing seam roofs. And you know, for those of you who looked at it, the cheaper standing seam solution is basically the same price as the other contractor's TPO solution. I think part of the reason for that is likely that Mountain View is the contractor that's going to be on site to do the sides, the flashing above the walls, to tie it back into the roof. So they are likely already recouping their mobilizing costs in their original proposal of work. In that email, I sort of gave you a list of all the change orders that are out there, if that's of any interest, and then an updated version of the budget. And then I tried to, I think I tipped you in the email, not in the report, of the last few pieces that we have outstanding. A couple of those are just sort of general ongoing maintenance issues that if we can do it for cheaper under the project, because we have the trades there, we will do that. If we can't, that's something that we can punt and just do throughout the year as part of the regular work of upkeeping buildings. So I'm happy to answer any questions on any of that, and I'll give Christy an opportunity to chime in if there's anything important that I've forgotten. And I know she was on site today, so if there's any surprises from today, she can chime in. But I think in the demo, we've sort of opened everything up where we think there could be unwanted surprises.
Yeah, nothing came up today. There wasn't anything. Everything seemed to be going pretty well. They're actually starting to, build things back up. It's a little less So it's a little bit less demoed at this point.
Morgan, question about the Mountain View
Mary,
warranty,
is there any chance you can throw
their
that in the?
standing seam option?
So if I get your question wrong, you can throw it in the chat just to me and I can read it. But I think you
Okay.
asked about the warranty for the standing seam option, and yeah, those would be warranted. My understanding is all three of the proposals that were part of that PCO, those are the three that would be warranted.
Okay, great, thanks. And there's no recourse with the people who did the last not such a bang up job on the roof?
I don't think so. I think nobody who's currently in the building is remembering that work being done. So I suspect it was a while ago.
Okay. Any other questions related to the change orders? Any thoughts from folks about which roofing option seems best? I'm partial to the Mountain View. I don't see why we wouldn't do a standing seam option since it sounds much more durable and as if it will avoid future problems. And it's comparable in cost to that TPO re-roof anyway.
No, that sounds good to me. Morgan, I have a question around the little shot of the expenditures, the original and the anticipated. So if I'm reading this correctly,
Oh, you got muted.
did you catch any of that?
I got as far as if I'm reading this correctly.
Oh, shoot. Just wondering regarding the original budget and the anticipated expenditures. I'm reading that we're going to be over, so I'm just wondering if I'm reading that correct.
Nope. At this point, what the original budget was just something that I took from the documents that I got from Franklin Northwest. They had bonded for 1.7, although they only had actual expenses identified of the 1.685. So if the way that I would read this, if you look at that anticipated column, if nothing else comes through and we spend the money as we expect, that $677 contingency is going to be sitting in the bank account. I can almost guarantee that that's going to go away, but I think we've got a little bit of room still on the architect line because we've budgeted for their expenses, including mileage, and no one's really been able to drive anywhere to have meetings. So I think that's going to come in a little bit lower. And that general contractor line, I think I've got all of the changes as through what I'm recommending tonight. So those last few things I tipped in the email, if we take those, they may eat against the contingency, but I think we're pretty close at this point.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Any more discussion on the change orders? All right, so no further.
So while Mary's cutting out, I think the motion would be to approve PCO number 17 and PCO number 19, option 1B.
change order number 19, the Mountain View.
Yeah, option 1B.
Am I at all audible?
You're in and out. Are you making that motion?
I was making that motion to accept the Mountain View roofing proposal and the change order PCO number 17, both of those.
Okay.
So I'll take a roll. Kat,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Miranda.
Yes.
Okay, that's all ayes. Okay. And Morgan, anything else?
Nothing from me. You've got future agenda items under board business, and that's it.
Yep. I don't, does anyone have anything they'd like to put on future agenda items?
I think I will just say that in terms of future agenda items, I'm going to be asking this group to come back together in a couple of weeks when our reopening plan is more solid, so that I can make sure that the board members are understanding where we're heading, what the guidance looks like, and how it all rolls together in terms of how we're engaging stakeholders all along the way to try to make sure that we have places for people's voices to be heard in this. So just know that's coming.
So Lynn, are you anticipating then prior to our next scheduled meeting or in lieu of our next scheduled meeting?
I'm not sure if Sheldon's going to need more change orders, Lisa. So I don't think it would be in lieu of. I think it's going to be an additional meeting later in July, because I definitely want to be communicating what the reopening framework is before you get to when your August meeting would typically be held. And I don't want to do that without first getting you guys to the table for you to understand the way things are going to come together. So I'm expecting that with the process we have outlined, we're going to have a pretty solid plan by the end of July. We still have some guidance we're waiting on, and as long as we get it when we're expecting it, I think we're going to be ready.
Okay, well, that makes sense. I can see that it will be beneficial to probably have a few extra meetings, even change orders notwithstanding, given what's coming down the pike here for the fall. Anything further, folks? Okay, so I'll make a motion then to adjourn. Lisa,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Miranda.
Yes.
Okay, I think I got everyone.